Key safety systems, bloodborne pathogens, procedure. Concern regarding risk of occupational exposure to bloodborne pathogens, including human immune deficiency virus, HIV, hepatitis B virus, HBV, hepatitis C virus, HCV, and others. All occupational exposure to blood or other potentially infectious materials, OPIM, place workers at risk for infection with bloodborne pathogens. OSHA defines blood to mean human blood components and products made from human blood. Other potentially infectious materials, OPIM, means 1. The following human body fluids: semen, vaginal secretions, cerebrospinal fluid, synovial fluid, pleural fluid, pericardinal fluid, peritoneal fluid, amniotic fluid, saliva and dental procedures, any body fluid that is visibly contaminated with blood, and all body fluids in situations where it is difficult or impossible to differentiate between body fluids. 2. Any unfixed tissue or organ other than intact skin from a human, living or dead. And 3. HIV-containing cell or tissue cultures, organ cultures, and HIV or HPV-containing culture, medium or other solutions, and blood organs, or other tissues from experimental animals infected with HIV or HPV. Copy of exposure control plan provided during training and can always be accessed on the QS drive. Demonstration on how to access safety procedures. Trying to help by rendering first aid is a natural human response. However, you must remember to protect yourself so you do not risk exposing yourself to harmful and sometimes deadly diseases carried in blood or other bodily fluids. Remember, your first step should be to follow the universal precautions. This is an approach to infectious control where all human blood and certain human body fluids are treated as if they were known to be infectious for bloodborne pathogens. Place item with contaminant blood in red biohazard containers. Company reviews annually ways to reduce exposure to risk. Any suggestions for improvement to our BBP program should be directed to HS&E. BBP Engineering Controls. Engineering controls and work practices are the preferred means of avoiding exposure to bloodborne pathogens. Engineering controls eliminates hazards at their source, aimed at minimizing the possibility of exposure. Engineering controls are checked and maintained on a regular schedule to keep them in good working order. Such things as a hand washing and minimization of the splashing or spraying of blood fall under this category. Hand washing facilities are located in all restrooms and in the HR office area. Wash hands immediately after removing gloves or other protective equipment, and after any hand contact with blood or potentially infectious fluids. Use soap and hot water. Eating, drinking, applying cosmetics or lip balm, and handling contact lenses are prohibited in areas where there is a potential for exposure. Review PPE required for various types of potential exposure per the procedure. Follow proper procedure. As the biggest risk at KSS is probably blood or bodily fluids from an accident or injury, we maintain BBP cleaning items in the first aid cabinet. Good housekeeping techniques are necessary to minimize the risk of occupational exposure to potentially infectious materials. There are specific procedures that must be followed in the event of such incidences. Make sure that you are prepared with proper procedures and protective practices before getting involved. Review usage of BBP cleaning items located in the first aid cabinet and or use of bleach. Sharps. The term referring to broken glass or hypodermic needles may not seem a likely hazard in our company. However, there are diabetic employees using syringes to inject themselves with insulin. Equipment and work areas must be cleaned and decontaminated as soon as possible after contact with any blood or potentially infectious fluids. PPE required for exposure risk. Personal protective equipment, PPE, is the best defense against any unexpected hazard. Review PPE for each potential exposure incident per procedure. Review OSHA standards for use of PPE, including limitations and disposal. Hepatitis B vaccine. The hepatitis B vaccine is available to anybody who has had an occupational exposure to blood or another potentially infectious material. You are entitled to this vaccine if such an incident occurs. The greatest bloodborne risk is infection by the hepatitis B virus. Because of this, hepatitis B vaccine is available before exposure if a worker risks occupational exposure on the job, after a worker has experienced occupational exposure to blood. Employees who don't wish to be vaccinated must sign a declination form. Employees who change their minds at a later date must still be provided with the vaccination. An employee's medical records regarding BBP exposure must be made available upon request. Medical records must be maintained on all employees with occupational exposure for the period of their employment plus 30 years. Exposure incident. All potential exposure incidents must be reported immediately to Human Resources. When an exposure incident is reported, KSS will arrange for an immediate and confidential medical evaluation. The medical evaluation must document how the exposure occurred, identify and test the source individual if possible, test the exposed employee's blood if consent is obtained, provide counseling, evaluate any reported illness. The company will provide the medical professional doing the exposure assessment with all relevant data needed to complete the employee's evaluation. Biohazard labels bags. All warning labels must bear the biohazard symbol, be printed in fluorescent orange or orange-red, and have lettering of a contrasting color. Red bags or containers may be used as a substitute for labels. For more information, contact HS&E or a member of management. Procedures stored in QS file under HS&E. Anyone interested in being a part of the safety committee should see Mitzi or Shannon.